Hi there, I'm Skaji. I'm a practicing witch and a professional tarot nerd. I'm glad you're here. Our vocabulary word this week is a secret. No, seriously. Our word this week is arcana. Arcana comes to us to the tarot from the Latin for secrets or mysteries, and it first entered English in the 1590s. Its earliest use in the tarot, at least as far as I could find, comes from The History and Practice of Magic by Jean-Baptiste Pitois, writing as Paul Christian in 1870. By the way, arcana is the plural, if you care. Arcanum is the singular. These days we have in general use the terms major arcana and minor arcana, which refer to two parts of the deck. The majors are those cards numbered 0 through 21 and include such favorites as the Fool, the Wheel, and of course the Tower. Who doesn't love a good disaster movie? You might run across other terms used for this concept. For the majors and minors, you might find greater or lesser. Instead of arcana, you might find keys. And as a general term for the majors, you might see trump. That term comes from the card's use in card games and derives from trionfi, Italian for triumph. I tend to use the common major arcana and minor arcana. And let's talk about that for a moment, shall we? One of the things that kind of got my goat early on in the study of the tarot was the way many early writers on the tarot treated the minors, like they were proverbial redheaded stepkids. Now, don't get me wrong, I got nothing against redheaded people, nor stepkids. It's just a phrase. Those writers talked about the cards like,
these greater keys grant us knowledge of the deep hidden meanings of the spiritual world.
oh, and there's these 56 other cards in a deck, but they're not that important. Oswald Worth didn't even include the minors in the deck he designed in 1889. You can probably tell that this kind of bothered me. While the majors were considered to be very spiritual cards, the minors were seen as relating more to the mundane matters of daily life. Since many of these early writers were members of various esoteric orders, such as the Golden Dawn, and the whole point of their stuff was a kind of spiritual enlightenment, I guess I can see why they granted the majors greater significance. But I think this distinction has its origins way back when with the Greek philosophers who gave greater importance to reason than emotion. I could be wrong, but that's how it looks to me. I see life on this blue marble a little bit differently, I guess. I do think we are spiritual beings, but we live in a physical world. Seeing things like that, the day-to-day aspects of our lives are just as important oftentimes as our spiritual lives. And it seems to me that finding a good balance between our spiritual and physical lives really is the key to a fulfilling experience. But I'm not that bright, and your mileage may vary. So I suppose I've ranted on enough about all that. Let's move on to our card of the week. The Nine of Swords, and it was suggested by Bree. Thanks, Bree. I was talking to last week's card suggestee, anywho, I was talking to my dear friend Magna and mentioned Bree's suggestion, and they said, are we okay? What with the Five of Wands, Five of Cups, and now the Nine of Swords? Yes, my friends, it's all fine. Everything's fine. When looking at the minor arcana cards, there are a few bits to consider, and that would be the suit, the number, and of course the imagery, but not necessarily in that order. The suit of swords is traditionally associated with the element of air, which I associate with our mental world, the realm of thinking, perceiving, and communicating. This isn't the only correspondence out there in the realm of the tarot, but I'm going to go with that for now since it's the most common. Swords equal air. A couple of quotes about air that I particularly like are, air, I should explain, becomes wind when it is agitated. That's by Lucretius from On the Nature of Things. Lucretius was a Roman poet who lived in the 1st century BCE and was an Epicurean philosopher. One more recent quote is from poet and scientist and a bunch of other cool stuff, Katerina Stoikova Klemmer, from her collection, The Air Around a Butterfly. How to write a poem. Catch the air around a butterfly. In many decks, the suit of swords carries a generally negative feel. Consider the 10 of swords, or the 3 of swords, or the 8 of swords, or the 9 of swords. I think you get the picture, or pictures, as the case may be. But don't let that apparent struggle or darkness of the swords get you down. The imagery can make it difficult to wrap our heads around the more positive aspects of the element of air. I like thinking. I may not be very good at it, but I do a lot of it. And I simply love that, oh, cool kind of feeling I get when the lights really go on. The element of air is a double-edged sword. Of the many things I equate with air, one is order. We can see order as restrictive and irritating at times. Do this, don't do that. Can't you see the signs? But we can also see order as quite possibly the only part of human nature which has allowed us naked apes to survive. Ordering our lives, working together, common goals. Now, I don't see any of the cards as always this or always that. Sometimes it's just harder to see the upside of a situation which really, really sucks. And we see an awful lot of those kinds of situations in the swords. The 9s in the tarot are associated in the Western occult Kabbalah with the Sephirot Yesod, which is associated with foundation. Now, if I've not said it before, I am not a Kabbalist. It's mostly because I'm too lazy to do all that study. However, I do recognize how influential the Kabbalah has been in the tarot in our modern age, and by modern, I mean since the early 19th century. Yesod, meaning foundation, is kind of like a factory. All kinds of nifty spiritual energy flows into Yesod, which then assembles all of that stuff into Malkut, or our physical universe. Or at least that's how my think meat interprets it. Yeah, your mileage may vary. The way I see the numbered card in the tarot is it's like a story. The number 9 is there at the end of the story. It's the fulfillment part of the story in that suit. In my high school English class, I was taught this fancy word denouement for the resolution part of the story. Although I think it's kind of funny that we used a French word in my English class. So I see the 9s as the resolution of the suit's story. Yes, I know there's a number 10. We're not talking about number 10 today. In the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, we can clearly see why many readers call this the nightmare card. And it frequently does carry the meaning of worry and things that keep us up at night. And if this is the resolution of a story, it sure looks like things didn't go well, doesn't it? And check out this part. It's a little picture of a couple of dudes fighting. But we also have this lovely quilt on the bed too. And on it we see these squares with red roses. These days many folk think of red roses as being associated only with love. But that isn't the only association out there. The rose has also been associated with secrets, as in sub rosa, or with death, at least to the Romans and some stuff that I read. Also on the quilt, there are symbols for the zodiacal signs. If we put all these things together then, our poor worrying friend is covered by potentiality. And ending as represented by the rose and the passage of time as represented by the zodiac signs. Couldn't we interpret this then as, yeah, you screwed up and it kind of troubles you, but with time you can move past it and heal. Here in the Urban Tarot, we have a particularly gruesome image. It is kind of gruesome, right? And in the Toth tradition, this is a Toth-style deck. This card is named Cruelty. I've never been much of an athlete, and that shouldn't come as much of a shock, really. But words, that's been my playground. We've all known mean people who used language like a sword. They could cut you with it. One of my struggles in life has been taking the edge out of my words. And I'd like to think that I've dulled the sword, so to speak, over the years. And I'm still working on it, too. So with this, then, we have the communication side of air, using our thoughts and our words without the interference of that pesky heart, without compassion. And in this card, we can really understand the idea of thoughts untempered by compassion. I think the designer of the Urban Tarot, Robin Scott, said it better than I can. Take any idea far enough, and you will find the point where you must choose between being right and being humane. Now, in the Wildwood Tarot, we see a divergence from more traditional imagery and interpretations. This card is titled Dedication. The designers explain this idea in their book, but honestly, I don't see that in the art. Look at her. She looks bored and distracted. She's just kind of half-assed shooting that bow and hadn't hit a thing. And by the way, arrows in this deck represent air. And if we think of the feathers in her hair as thoughts, well, they're all over the place. But there is a way to see this card as dedication, like it's titled. If you've seen my first video on Krampus, the lighting was bad, the sound was bad, and I certainly haven't gotten any prettier. But I'd like to think I've gotten a little better at this video thing. And I hope to get better still. When we dedicate ourselves to something, it's important to remember that it's okay to suck at a thing as we learn. Cartoonist and illustrator Stephen McCraney said it best. The master has failed more times than the novice has tried. Here's the Nine of Swords from the Pulp Tarot, and in this card we get a twofer. The art here has that Rider-Waite-Smith theme going on, but take a look at the picture up on the wall up there. It's the image from the Five of Swords in that deck. 2 cards in one. That's a bargain. If you remember from the other fives that I've discussed, 5 is often related to conflict and struggle. So in this card, we can imagine that our insomniac friend here is thinking about an argument or a disagreement with the fellow in the picture. Or maybe she's remembering a lost love taken from her by conflict. In the Nine of Swords, we can see the interplay of resolution and air. The downside is easy to see, worry and regret, but what might an upside be? If you use reversals, that upside might present itself as an upside-down card. But sometimes the only upside is the recognition of the trouble and the resolution to do better. So there's our Nine of Swords, suggested by my friend Bree. Thanks again, Bree. I get the feeling that I've rambled on a bit with this one, but I hope you've enjoyed your time here today. I've enjoyed it. And if you did, do the like, subscribe, and share thing, and you can leave me comments too. My name is Skaji. Safe journey. Another more recent quote is from poet and scientist and a bunch of other cool stuff. Katerina Stoikova Klemmer. And we see an awful lot of those. Yesod, meaning factory, and ending as I think the designer of the Urban Tarot, Robin Scott, says it better than I can. I think the designer of the Urban Tarot, Robin Scott, says it better than I can. I know I found those words somewhere. There it is. And if we think of the feathers in her hair as